What's up, everyone? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Paul James Show, where we preview, we review, we focus on all things Geelong Cats and the broader AFL. And today we've got an agenda full of really fascinating items to discuss, headlined, of course, by our recent match, Geelong versus Essendon in the NAB Community Series. The preseason series of matches is our final match before we get into season 2025 at long last. It's been a long wait. And we're going to get into, a whole bunch of different things. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can support the Hoops crew and what we are doing. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Give the video a thumbs up. I'm talking about you watching live right now. Give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends. Tell other people to check it out. Jump in live. Share your thoughts and comments as well. We want to hear what you've got to say in the chat. But, of course, the chat can get pretty cluttered. There's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people with lots of things to say about all things football, about all things Cats. And so the super chat function might be for you. It costs you like $2. Your comment gets pinned. Everyone can see it. I can't miss it. Your comment, your question, your concern, your random thought for the day that you want to just express. You want me to pump up the fact that it's your birthday. Put a super chat in, and I'll make sure that the entire community shouts out your birthday along with me. Whatever the reason is that you might want to use the super chat function, please consider doing so. Your comment is guaranteed to get read on the show. Now, like I said, we've got an agenda tonight that we're going to go through. There's quite a few topics that we're going to discuss, beginning with a match report from the Geelong and Essendon Community Series match. We're going to go around the grounds and talk about some of the other matches that have been on. We're going to discuss a whole range of big issues that have been playing out across Geelong and the broader AFL this week. Just the last few days, really, since we did the Paul James Show last time. There's been a lot. There's never a dull moment. In these days and weeks before the season begins, there is never a dull moment. There's always lots to talk about in the world of football, and we're keen to break it all down with you. Finally, there's Nuff of the Week and some Q&A with everyone here in the comments. So very much looking forward to chatting with you later on and engaging with you as the show plays out. Now, let's get going by first talking a little bit about the Geelong and Essendon game, where the final scores read Geelong 12-11-83 to the hyper-efficient, hyper-accurate Bombers 17-104. Now, it doesn't really make great reading when you look at it through that lens, but of course there's a whole bunch more to this match that we'll break down shortly. You've hopefully had the opportunity to check out my reaction video to this particular match already. That is live on the YouTube channel, and please consider checking it out. Like more than 1,300 of you have already done so far, but we can see some key stats there. Shannon Neal with 2, Tyson Stengel with 2, Jeremy Cameron with 2 goals, all apiece, whilst disposal-wise, Jack Bowes was a ball magnet with 31 disposals, as was Brian Myers, and Jeremy Cameron does what Jeremy Cameron does. He wanders the ground, accumulates the ball whenever, wherever, however he pleases. He got 23. While for the Bombers, technically yet to debut player, Isaac Kako, got 4 and should have had a 5th. He was robbed of a 5th there late in the piece. Nate Caddy with 3, Archie Perkins with 2, while Elijah Sartis got 31, Ben Hobbs with 29, and Andy McGrath with 28 disposals himself. As a result, it might be a bit of a disappointing one. If we take it at face value, if we look at a scoreline, I'm sure there's plenty of people in the chat tonight that are bound to be a bit disappointed by how things played out. But I think there's a lot more texture to this particular match, and there's a lot more context. It's exactly what you should expect from any preseason game. We're going to do a little bit of a side-by-side here, bring up some of the numbers, talk about some of the team stats. I've, of course, already discussed this again in the full reaction video, but there is more for us to kind of break down when it comes to this particular match. So let's get that on the screen right now. Whoop, there we go. Again, 12-11-83, 104 from 17 goals to the Bombers. They were incredibly accurate. They were incredibly efficient with those shots on goal. A massive credit to them, but it's not something that necessarily them or most other teams will replicate many times over the course of the year. I say that, and I believe the Pies only kicked 2 behinds in their match against the Tigers the very next day. It's not a typical scoreline, so let's not lose too much sleep over it. Anyway, We can talk about some of the big picture things. I'm not really going to break, I'll kind of project some of our stats here so people can have a bit of a look as I talk. But really, it's more about the players and some of the things that we want to talk about here because we have gone through this detail before. So, Sam de Koning, he again played in the ruck. There's pros, there's cons to that. I think there's some questions still from many people as to whether that is the right decision. But of course, we are kind of in limbo at the moment while we wait for a Toby Conway to get fit. We talk about Mitch Edwards right now. And I think also Sam to just settle into the role. I think I've seen some pretty reasonable commentary from people who've dropped their thoughts on the reaction video where they've spoken a little bit about Sam, maybe not necessarily having the tank yet for it. And that's probably fair. It takes a while to kind of develop that midfield tank when you've been playing a key defensive post for quite some time. But I was intrigued by the way that the club seems to want to rotate Mark Blitzarves and Sam de Koning through the ruck. I, again, don't think it's ideal, but both are suited to play that key defensive, that fullback kind of role, but both are being used as a ruckman as well. I could see some really clever switches there between the two players to utilize their different strengths and exploit the opponents while still keeping both on the ground as we move into the season proper. It'll be really interesting to see how the Cats go about that. Really interesting for now. But of course, in the short term, the numbers for the two don't necessarily look amazing. They were certainly pipped at the post when it comes to, and I need to be able to scroll across here. There we go. Hit outs. Sam Draper had 25, Sam de Koning with 16, Nick Bryan with 14, and then Mark Blitzarves with 9. We were outgunned in the ruck for sure, and we won't ignore the fact that Shannon Neal also got his hands on it 5 times as well. We were kind of outgunned there in the ruck. Sam Draper, when he's on, he's really on. He had a good day, and admittedly, this was very much one of those good Sam Draper days. As Bombers fans are all too aware, you don't see too many of them from time to time. You see just as much shit as you do the good stuff, but he had a good day and he performed very well. And Sam, needs to learn from that, I think, in particular. Paddy Dangerfield, of course, spent a lot of time up forward. We got the best and worst of Paddy as a forward. He kicked 1 goal, 1. Great goal, the one that he scored. But of course, the missed shot tugged it heavily to the left. It's a shame, but we're kind of used to this from Paddy, aren't we? There's lots of assets. I guess we lost Gary Rowan in the off season there. And I still think he's a very big loss, in large part because he was hyper accurate. Danger's going to go up there. He's got speed, similar-ish to what Gary Rowan can bring, but he doesn't kick the ball as well. So there's different ways that we'll utilize Danger's strengths, and hopefully he's having shots from much closer so that the likelihood of him actually slotting it is much higher. From there, we can talk a little bit about Bailey Smith and Tanner Bruin. Of course, there's lots of conversation about one of these two individuals. In fact, both of these individuals for different reasons, really. Bailey Smith was out with a knee, injured it during a Pilates session. He'll be back for the opening round. No questions or concerns around Bailey Smith's health going into that game, but they were not going to take any risks based on him tweaking it during a Pilates session recently. It was the non-ACL injured knee. But yeah, no risk for your star recruit, especially going into round 0. Tanner Bruin has apparently injured a finger. But we'll see what happens in his case. I don't know. Again, there's lots of questions being asked about him right now. I don't really want to entertain that. We spoke about that in the show the other day. We'll wait and see what the selectors do when it comes to this opening round match and when someone inevitably has to speak about the situation, if it is in fact involving the Cats, which is a whole other kettle of fish. Interestingly, Stephen King was in the boss chair for this particular match. Scotty was there. He's I'm sure had his say. I'm sure he provided some opportunities and feedback. But Stephen King was at the helm there, and that was a really interesting one just to see, I guess, what sort of flavour he wants to bring to it. Now, the trick with that is it's pretty hard to get a feel for it during a pre-season match where clubs are already experimenting. So we don't know how many of these ideas are his, how many of these ideas are what the Cats at large are looking to do. I think it was just a really good opportunity for him to stretch his wings and kind of show the competition again. He's had some opportunities. So I'm saying it's Kingy's fault, Jackie says. I'm not saying it's not his fault. How many double negatives was that? I don't know. No, I don't think it's Kingy's fault. But we can't, correlation, causation. I'm a maths teacher at heart. Maybe he's responsible. Anyway, I think it was a really good opportunity for him to kind of show what he can do to the broader football world. Of course, he had some opportunities there at Gold Coast before Dimmer came in. But When you're coaching a lesser Gold Coast Suns team of the time versus the Geelong Football Club, who's been there and thereabouts for 20 odd years now, it's a good look. Beyond that, Mitch Nevitt and Connor O'Sullivan, their opening round chances. Look, I don't think either of them did themselves any massive favours, but I also don't think they hurt their chances either. Mitch Nevitt with 22 disposals, I think was really quite solid and really injected himself in some really important times. I think he was the better of the two, but Connor O'Sullivan didn't have nearly as much game time. If I try and bring that up, if this shrunken version of my screen will allow me to fit it in there, I'm going to scroll. There we go. Now it's playing ball. Time on ground. We'll filter this by Geelong. And we'll scroll down to near the bottom where we see that Connor O'Sullivan only played 40% of game time. So he was working on limited minutes. Now, the reasoning, I guess that remains to be seen. But, I think there's still good signs for both of them. I think both performed well. They just had varying levels of game time. And we'll just have to see what the club decides they want to do with that in the future. Let's talk about the Bombers for a moment. And only a moment, because I know there's a few Essendon supporters have found their way into the comments section of the reaction video and said I'm smoking some copium to get through this one. I stand by what I said the other day. There's not much to see here for Cats fans. We rotated players, we rested players late in the game. When I saw some of our key players coming off the ground, I knew that we'd put the queue in the rack. But we must give some credit to what Essendon delivered. They were much better than I think I had expected. I think much better than most had expected in this particular occasion. And I think it does show that they are, as I said in my ladder tipping video, they are building. They've got a young core that's going to take some time. But we really got to see some of the best of some of those players, from Nate Caddy with his 3 goals to Isaac Kako with his 4. Of course, I don't think we can expect to see that from Kako all the time. I think this was a great learning exercise for Geelong and every other team in the competition who could see at an AFL level what this kid could deliver. But as a few people are saying in the comments there, Kako is an absolute star. He's going to be a long-termer for them. And I'm very excited to see what he can bring. But year one, I think we need to keep the expectations in check for what this kid can be. He's going to be excellent. And he's going to have some good moments along the way, undoubtedly, because you can't really suppress a player with that sort of talent. But, let's not get too carried away for season one. Would be my main thought. And if I have to eat humble pie at the end of the year, I'm fine with that, because that just shows us that an unbelievable talent has been able to step in and demonstrate at the highest level straight out the gate. That's exciting for the competition. But I expect that things will quieten down a little bit for him here when the stakes go up. Ben has decided here in his show notes to reference something that is also in the notes. His tipping point video went up the other day, and he proceeded to tip Essendon to finish 6th. Now, he's made foolish decisions like this before. I think he even tipped Essendon for top 4 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. He tipped him to finish 6th this year, and that's about all that needs to be said about that matter, because he'll be wrong again, just like he was in 2022. The best and most important thing that I kind of discussed when we were doing a preview for that match was really that we wanted to get through unscathed, and we did. And I think as far as anyone's concerned, myself as a member of the Hoops crew, and I'm sure everyone watching either live or after the fact on YouTube here, I'm sure every single one of you are just relieved that everyone got through unscathed from both teams, I might add. We don't want to see injuries anywhere, but as a Geelong-focused channel, I'm just thrilled to see that all of our Cats came out the other side without any injuries, barring the ones that we went into the game with, like Tanner Bruin, like Bailey Smith. Beyond that, we're going to talk about some 3-2-1s here. Now, I don't have any fancy graphics for that, but we can kind of, I guess, really, I mean, the key stats actually really highlight, I think, some of the players that I wanted to focus on. For me personally, and I'm going to sort by disposals because it allows me to find the player a lot quicker, but I want to highlight in particular Graham Myers, who definitely missed some targets over the course of the game, but he is a high-risk, high-reward player with the way he goes about his business, and you kind of expect some targets to get missed from time to time. He gets the 1 vote for me. At 2, it's Jack Henry, who was really, really important. Now, yes, Nate Caddy did get 3 goals against him, but I'm not too fazed by that, because some of those goals, they were lace up, almost impossible to stop as a key defender, simply because the delivery from the Essendon forwards was so good. beyond that, Jack Henry took some incredible intercept marks. He was all over. I'm seeing comments here about Ben's tipping strategy. I actually haven't watched the video yet. I'm kind of scared to go and watch and try and work out some sort of logic behind what he was going for there. But yeah, 2 votes to Jack Henry for a very good performance there as an intercept key defender. And I want to then beyond that kind of highlight the performance of, and I'm going to have to scroll across again to get our game time here. I want to focus a little bit on Max Holmes, who himself got 22 disposals just from 74% game time, and he was really quite efficient. And I think that was, for me, that was the big point of difference between him and Jack Bowes, who obviously had the most, but he wasn't as efficient. He wasn't hitting those targets, especially by foot, to the level that we needed him to. That will come, of course. It's a preseason match, and I love Jack Bowes. That is so well documented. I love him and what he brings to the Cats, because he's got this hard edge that I think is awesome, with a bit of speed, a bit of flair, and a bit of skill. But for me, the 3 votes goes to Max Holmes, just based on a proportionate thing here, which we're allowed to do because it's the preseason. Season proper, you play a little bit less time. That might work against you a little bit. In this case, it's an exception. Max Holmes gets the 3 for me. Now, let's move into our next section here, where we're going to talk about the VFL curtain raiser. I don't have the numbers to bring up on the screen in this particular case, but the Cats went down to the Bombers by 17 points. We did see some of our AFL listed players getting a gig, as well as some notable VFL players. So we saw Jack Martin out there, delisted, but now playing with the VFL. Oscar Riccardi, Jed Buse was out there, George Stevens, Jay Polkinghorne with 2 goals, came out of the blocks really, really quick, and did go a little bit quieter after that, but started really strong. Ollie Wiltshire, Patrick Retchko, Reece Stanley, and O'Sullivan just for the 4th quarter. And again, that links to why he spent less time on the field in the AFL game. It was great to see some of our... I'm seeing Aviation say 21 points. I can't remember what the number was. Ben saying 17 here in the numbers. 21 for the main game, the VFL game. We went down by 17, supposedly. I can't remember now. But it was good to see some of those boys getting some game time and, of course, stretching their legs. Any high-quality team has a seconds that are performing strongly, winning matches. And even though they didn't get it in this case, it was good to see some of the key players performing really well. What does this mean going into round 0? Now, that is, I guess, one of the big questions that all Cats fans will be asking. What should we make of this particular result? And I've said a few times, there's no concerns here from me. Am I saying this means we beat Brisbane? Absolutely not. I still have to kind of work out what I want to do in that tipping space going into that particular matchup, because the Lions, obviously the reigning premiers, they're playing at home. They're a really high-quality team. There's so many reasons why you could justify tipping the Lions. There's plenty of reasons why you might want to tip the Cats as well. I'm not 100% sure yet, but I don't think what we saw from the Cats on this particular occasion does anything to diminish my confidence in what the Cats can do this season. It's just whether we hit the ground running or not. So I think a solid enough start. Not much to see here. And we take on the Brisbane Lions Thursday night at 7:50 p.m. Post-game live will follow the show. We've got to make sure we have our post-game lives on round 0. The very first match of the season. Ben will be... I'm sure I'll try and drop in along the way as well. And of course, there's so many of our frequent flyers that I've seen in the chat so far that will pop up on the stream as well. We're looking forward to chatting to all of you about the match and hopefully the 4 points that we got. Now, we're about to move on to our next segment here, where we're going to go around the grounds and talk about some of the other games that have been played. But before all that, let's take a word from our sponsor.
The Hoops Crew Media Network is proudly sponsored by Cyril Cook Florist. Visit them at shop 1211 Leather Street in Breakwater. Phone them on 035 222 2244 or visit their website at www.cyrilcookflorist.com.au and use the offer code GOCATS in the voucher field at checkout to get 20% off your next online purchase.
Thank you, Cyril Cook Florist, as always, for all that you do and your support that you provide the Hoops Crew. It's very much appreciated. And make sure, if you haven't already, use the 20% online code GOCATS. That is all capitals, no spaces, GOCATS, to get a 20% discount on every single online purchase you make. And again, thank you, Cyril Cook Florist. Let's go around the grounds now where we're going to talk about some of the games that have been played as well as some of the upcoming ones. I mentioned before we're talking about a hyper-efficient Collingwood team who slaughtered the Tigers, and this will be, I think, a very frequent thing. I wasn't too behind, so I had a colleague that got a little bit too carried away. But they were very accurate. 6 goals, 13, 49 to the Tigers to 21 goals, 6, 132 from the Pies. Lots of high flyers there. We don't really need to go into too many details, but if we bring up some of the disposals, it was Lipinski and Nick Dacos in particular that got the damage, did all the damage. They were incredible through the midfield there, but also Tim Membry with 4 goals in his first game first semi-formal game for the Pies. Really did a great job for them as well, but he wasn't alone. Myercheck with 4, Bobby Hill with 4, McStay and Jamie Ellett with 2 goals apiece. It was a very good performance from the Collingwood forward line, which has kind of had some questions asked about it over the last 12 months or so, with some aging bodies, some lesser profiled players in that space. It was a good performance from them, though. Must shout that out. Let's jump across to some other matches that have been played. Not many of them have actually played out as of yet. We'll go back when it loads. We did see the Dogs, as was kind of shouted out in the comments before. We did see the Dogs get up by 11 points, but for me, one of the big talking points from this, and thankfully the AFL side highlights it, Bont with a bit of an injury scare. Now, I'm sure they are being incredibly cautious, but the Dogs have had a woeful run of injury in this preseason. And if anyone in the comments right now has heard any updates about how Bont is going, I'd love to hear him because I haven't seen any of that yet. But it's a worrying sign for the Dogs. Their best player, a bloke who absolutely deserves a Brownlow before his time is done and will be featuring probably pretty prominently this season, assuming this is not a lasting injury. It's a worry for them. We bring up some stats, though. Low scoring sort of game. Good to see the Hawks lose, though. Lockie McNeil with 4, Norton with 3, Sam Darcy with 3. A nice spread of goals for the Hawks. Nick Watson with 2, McDonald with 2, Warple, Finn McGuinness, Jack Ginnivan, Ambrosio, Chol all with 1, Sam Davidson with 1 for the Dogs. The worry for the Dogs, I would say here, even though they got the win, is that was 4 different goal scorers. That's it. You're putting a lot of stock in a few players here. McNeil doesn't have the profile that a lot of these other players do. He's maybe had one out of the box. Will he be able to replicate, though, is a whole other thing. And I'd be semi-concerned if I was a Dogs fan at this point. I've got to shout out old mate Bussy Sniffer here, who's talking about the Pies fans acting like they won the premiership because they belted a bunch of kids. You're absolutely right. They are getting a little bit carried away. Finals are not won in February, people. Bombers supporters, you'd do well to learn that lesson as well. Moving back to the other matches, if this plays ball, there we go. Right now, we've got a live match. The Lions, early in the second term, they're up by 13 points against the Crows. The two teams with the same song are going head-to-head right now. We'll take a look at what has happened so far, because certainly with this show on, I have not been dialed into it. Let's see how we... Oh, not the team stats. Give me some individual numbers here. Okay, so it's a pretty balanced sort of thing. Saligo, Scholl, and Pedler with 1 goal apiece for the Crows, while Jasper Fletcher is an interesting goal scorer. Josh Dunkley, Jared Berry, Zach Bailey, have all kicked a goal each for the Lions. I'm noting no talls kicking the goals for, well, either team so far, but specifically the Lions is a really interesting one. Obviously, with Joe Danaher having retired, that is the big question mark, I think, over them, is that forward line potency and getting a key forward who's able to replace, because we all know Hipwood ain't that good. Moving right along, though, to the remaining games of the round. Not necessarily a huge amount to say here. Of course, this is the preseason, so the stakes are not very high. But tomorrow at 5:20, we've got the Giants and the Blues. We've got the Suns versus the Swans at 8:10 on Friday night. Saturday, we see the Saints go head-to-head with the Power at 3:10. The Eagles will play against North at 6:10 on Saturday. And then Sunday, the final preseason game of the year, the Fremantle Dockers and the Melbourne Demons go head-to-head at 6:10. I believe that is all our Victorian time. I believe from memory that the AFL site converts it. Otherwise, it's going to be a late one for everyone. So all of those games can be watched on Foxtel and KO, including the game that's happening right now. But you wouldn't leave this show to go and check out the Lions and the Crows. You're going to stick with us for some awesome new segments going forward. let's get into some of the big issues of the week, because there's quite a few topics that we need to discuss here and quite a few graphics that we're about to start rolling through. So, Paddy Dangerfield first up. I obviously alluded to his forward line role before. He has spoken about that a little bit. I just need to find an article here because Damien Barrett has the inside word there on what the Cats are intending here. Let me bring it up. Where is it? There, Damien Barrett, do your thing. Damien Barrett reports Cats reveal plans for Dangerfield's positional switch. We've seen, obviously, and as Barrett kind of reports here, talking about Lee Matthews and a whole range of other players. And oh my God, I've just seen a comment from Aviation Flicks that nearly made me have a stroke. Absolutely not. Jeremy Cameron will not retire this year. But this, Chris Scott's kind of spoken a little bit about Danger's move forward, which could prove to be a very effective one. We've seen it with the likes of Lee Matthews. We've seen it with Malcolm Blight. We've seen it with Gary Ablett Sr. as referenced there. And there's so many other high-profile cases of that. Matty Pavlich kind of fits the bill. Obviously played a range of different positions, but then late in his career, forward line was kind of his go. And that was really a pretty effective move for Freo in that particular case. But let's kind of examine a little bit of what Scotty said. Like most others, he hasn't had the material interruption. Of course, Scotty would use words like material in a scenario. Like, he hasn't had a material interruption. The only thing for Pat is the experience of the last couple of years where he's missed parts of the season, and we prefer to have him available in the first couple of months. And I think he'll play forward early in the season. He does specifically say early in the season. And I think that is an interesting extract there, because that doesn't mean that's going to be the go all year. Horses for courses, and of course he's our captain, and we know he's arguably still one of the very best players on our list. And when the whips are cracking, I would very much like to see Paddy Dangerfield in the midfield, bashing up some bodies and diving on the ball like he does, and reefing the ball out in ways that are completely miraculous. So, but Shadu rightly mentions, if we just keep him in the goal square, surely he's not going to miss too many shots then. If there was a forward who could miss a shot from the top of the goal square, I'd put money on Paddy Dangerfield, but he will kick 99 goals out of 100, you would think. So deep out of the goal square. And look, honestly, with his strength and his speed, I actually don't think it's a crazy idea to do it anyway. So and we saw that happen with Gary Rowan. We've seen it, and this goes back quite a way now, but, like when Danger first debuted for the Cats, like he was, in that first season, there was obviously there was the injury against the Hawks as well, where he was playing out of the goal square. He is incredibly dangerous when he goes up there. I think about a final where he just ripped the Swans apart out of playing a deep forward position. This works. There's a history of this working, and he's got a greater level of strength than the Gary Rowan does. Gary had to rely on his speed. Danger's got speed and strength, and I think that's going to be a really valuable asset going forward. So you could, isolate him in the goal square, and God help whoever's got to play on him at that point. That is a terrifying prospect if you're a defender. So that is the Patrick Dangerfield situation. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about some accommodation options that are going to be available to people should they choose to go to Kardinia Park in the near future. And I want to address this with the screaming, sulking, non-Geelong supporting masses out there. This does not mean that Geelong, the club, is doing this. Kardinia Park is its own entity. But apparently there's a report, and I can't read it because it's behind the Geelong Addy paywall, that they are looking to build a hotel on the site and an underground car park and a whole range of different things going on, which is, of course, going to really greatly benefit the Geelong Football Club and getting people into the ground. But there's a lot of big wins coming. So Geelong's submitted a proposal to build a multi-story hotel and a home for the AFLW team on the Kardinia Park precinct. There's going to be an indoor training facility to be built on top of the Senior Citizens Hub, out with the old and in with the new, Ben says. And yes, there's talk about an underground car park as well, which with the number of people that are kind of having to park on this chopped up turf, and it's awful. Anyone who's driven into GMHBA before and is trying to leave afterwards, if you're not running out of the ground early, you're in for another hour in that car park. It is absolutely atrocious. And any sort of solution, like say an underground car park, creates more options for people. It potentially creates more outlets for people to depart the ground. I think this is a really huge opportunity that could come from it. And of course, it's going to cost a lot of money, and probably the state government's going to give us a good chunk of it. But It's not the Geelong Football Club receiving that. It is Cardinia Park. It is Geelong that is receiving that. So sucked in all the sooks. Bite me. Next up, we're going to talk about some fixtures for the VFL and VFLW teams. So let us again share our screen here, and we will come back and we will focus on the Smithies VFL, VFLW fixtures. Let's talk a little bit about some of those fixtures that have now been released, because we've got round 1 through to 13 of the men's and round 1 through to 9 revealed for the VFLW. And with then the latter rounds, so 14 through 21 of the VFL and 10 through 14 of the VFLW to be revealed with times and venues later on in the season. Let's just jump straight to the key details here, because that's what we really want to talk about. Some of these will be opening acts, I'm sure, for some games at GMHBA, which is really exciting. Others, we're going to get ourselves a nice night game in Geelong, for example, against the Bull Ants, which you'll want to go to because the Bull Ants suck. It's a nice, easy win for our VFL team, you would hope. Anyway, you can see our first few games here. Obviously, it's the VFL. We don't travel interstate very often in this. Trevor Barker Oval, GMHBA. We've got 3 consecutive home games there. Icon Park against the Blues, back to GMHBA. ETU Stadium, we're Whitten Oval. Like, again, local. When do we play some of these interstate teams? Gold Coast Suns at GMHBA. The Brisbane Lions at GMHBA. How have we pulled this off? The GWS Giants at GMHBA. Who did we bribe? This does not help the conversation that people have about us. GWS Giants to be confirmed, but it is the second time we play them, so I'd imagine we'll be heading interstate for that one. And then maybe the Sydney Swans, we go interstate, because otherwise it's a lot of Victorian time. Going back to GMHBA, Brendan has just shouted out saying, I want to be able to receive a text. You and me both, mate. They need to fix it. And I believe it's something they are looking at. Whether something has happened, though, I'm not sure. So that is the VFL men's team and some of the goings on there. A lot of time spent in Victoria in that case, not a lot of travel. It does make me feel a little bit sorry when you think about it through that lens, and you imagine a lot of the other Victorian teams are in the same boat. It does make me feel a little bit sorry for those interstate teams who are basically traveling to Victoria for 90% of the season. Or not 90, large portions of the season. The VFLW team, again, a lot of Victoria time. Deakin University, DSV, Deakin, we're staying local. But of course, the nature of that competition is a little bit different right now. Deakin is obviously our home ground for the VFLW. So lots of opportunities there to pop over and go check out what the girls are up to and cheer them on. They are doing some awesome work. The girls team at the AFLW, which then feeds down to the VFLW, is growing. It's building. Yes, we didn't quite have the season that we wanted this year, but we know that list is in really good shape. It's developing and they're going to be potent. Hopefully we're seeing a little bit of that through the VFL team as well. So that's a look at our season there. Of course, as was highlighted before, round 10 through to 14, still to be confirmed. Your timeline, probably pretty reliable. Locations still to be disclosed. All right, let us move back on to our next topic here, which relates to a legend of the Geelong Football Club. I'm looking for the graphic here. There he is, Tomahawk. He's joining the Carlton draft, which I mean, look, it's a bit of fun, bit of games, nothing too serious, but it's awesome to see Hawk back out and about. Now, of course, he's going to be doing a lot of commentary for Fox Footy this year. And that's if we're looking for our Tom Hawkins fix, stay tuned because he's coming our way nice and soon. But we do get to see him in the Carlton draft this year, which is great. It's going to be great fun. I look forward to seeing what the Hawk can bring. It'll be a great time. And he was picked. Hang on, let me find the details here. According to the Carlton draft, the Zero Hanger, I should say, who've put it together. Let's bring it up here. Tom Hawkins, Fremantle great Matthew Pavlich and former number 1 pick Brett Deledio will headline the return to footy. And we've got all the details here. Campaign launch in 2022. It's a lot of fun. People should absolutely get around. Oh my God. Remember when Brett Deledio wanted to come to Geelong? Yeah. What could have been? They're going to strap on their boots again. It'll be great to see Hawk kicking some goals. He's going to go play in a local league and hopefully kick 15 of them in the first half. It'd be great. Just dump him in the goal square, sit on his head, and poor key defenders. You might need 6 of them to try and get the job done. And you might still struggle. But it's great to see Hawk back at it once again. Next topic here relates to Brett Johnson, who is departing the Cats. Let me share my screen once again. Let's find it. We've got so many articles that we're going through here. Cats assistant. There we go. Brett Johnson is departing the Geelong's women's team to pursue some additional opportunities or new opportunities. He's been heading up the women's program for 5 seasons now. He's been doing a fantastic job, but he is departing. He's a former Hawthorn and Carlton player, for anyone unaware, and he's been doing some great work for Mac. It's a big loss to the women's team. Again, the women's team is really. I mentioned it a moment ago when we were talking about the fixture. The women's team is really coming along in leaps and bounds, and I'm keen to see how they develop. But this is a big loss. It hurts. So we'll have to see how it all develops at this particular point. But what Dan Lowther and the team are doing is fantastic. Hopefully we get someone really awesome in to fill that gap because, yeah, it's a loss. And, we don't like losing players. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about some free agents. Now, there's not much to see here if I'm being perfectly honest with myself and my opinions here, but we do have a list of all of the various free agents, and I'm going to project that now as well. Top free agents, boom. We've got a little list here. It's going to highlight players across many different clubs that are on the free agents list. Let's hone in on Geelong here. We've got a few key players that we want to pay attention to. Of course, there's a few that probably catch the eye for a few people, in particular Tom Atkins and Mark Blitzarves, but they're not alone. Jed Buse, Mitch Duncan, Cam Guthrie, Reece Stanley. I would almost make an argument that 3 of those 4 will be just done by the end of the season, retired by the end of the season, in Mitch, Cam, and Reece. But Jed Buse is getting towards the latter stage of his career as well. Hopefully he can stick around for a bit longer. I think he brings so much to the club. He would not have allowed Isaac Kako, for example, to kick 4 goals the other night. Some of these players are on the watch list for over the course of the season, but I don't think there's much to see here. I think all of those players will either retire or remain on the list at the end of next year. The bigger question is more about some of these other players across the entire competition and what movements will go on in that space, because the free agency space is really gotten quite intense in the last few years. There's movement to be found across the board. Every player in the competition is in the conversation. Of course, we're going to take Marcus Bontempelli. No doubt about it. Can't wait to see him in the Cats jumper next year alongside good mate Bailey Smith. All right. Let's get back to the topics of discussion here, where we're going to talk about Damien Hardwick and some questions that have been asked about him recently because his partner has been working with the Gold Coast Suns. Now, I don't think much of it. Of course, Dimmer's had some relationship problems that have been a bit public in the last couple of years. And so, of course, this probably attracts a little bit of extra attention. But she's a consultant for the club. I'll bring up the details here. We'll keep it fairly brief, though, because I don't really want to wade into relationship dramas on this show. But she's begun her role as a consultant on the club's media and consumer and commercial strategy products with AFL Media's Damien Barrett reporting. The clubs are now probing the league on whether her wage is included in the club's soft cap. Look, honestly, if I'm the other clubs, I get if you've got a question mark about something. I don't know. Do we need to make a fuss about this? I guess we probably do, because we want to make sure that if we're going to ask questions about Chris Scott and what money is and isn't in the soft cap, then I guess we have to ask questions about the partners of head coaches and their jobs within the club. I don't know. This is football news for the sake of football news at this point of the season, where we're just waiting for the real stuff to start. Couple more topics to discuss. State of Origin is on the way back, and that is exciting news. Obviously, Ben's put together a pretty great graphic here with Jeremy Cameron in the big V. But I'm looking forward to the idea. Like every single club with a recent meeting with CEOs and other head honchos from the AFL, the overwhelming response was yes, we want to see the big V come back against, whether it's an All-Stars, whether it's against South Australia, Western Australia, whatever it happens to be. The overwhelming consensus is yes, we want to see this, which I spoke about recently. I spoke about this fairly recently, and I would like the Indigenous All-Stars game to just get another year or two to really kick off and grow its own legs before something like this comes along, because I think it can steal the thunder a little bit, and we don't really want that. They are very different products. They are pitched differently. They are potentially going to run at different times of the... no, sorry, Amy, just because I'm seeing the comment. I don't think Chris Scott's wife works at the Cats. I think I was more referring to just the questions about Chris Scott and some of the deals he's been doing that got raised recently and then eventually shut down fairly recently as well. But yeah, it'd be nice to see that game going, but I would like to see it a couple of years for the Indigenous All-Stars game to really grow and flourish, and then potentially something like this get introduced. The big question is when. So we'll see how that comes about. And thank you, Amy. Sorry, I'm seeing the clarifications now in the chat. Next up is the Tassie Stadium, where there's been some delays, which raises a whole bunch of questions, because the AFL said that Tasmania's inclusion in the competition was contingent upon having a stadium, a brand new stadium ready to go. So if there's a delay, that's problematic for the number one team in Australia based on membership numbers. Yes, I know you could buy them for $10. The number one team in the competition in Australia, actually, based on membership numbers, it's a bit of a worry for them, because they'll have their plans, and I know that you're kind of working with governments and other parties and all those sorts of things. But I want to see this Tassie team get up. I want to see them get up and going. I want to see what this does for the broader competition, because I know we don't want 19 teams in the comp. So I'm really fascinated to see how all this plays out. Hopefully they can get it sorted soon. I'd love this mock-up design of what the stadium could look like, though. I think that's stunning and really suitable for the weather. I'd love to be able to go to that ground, look up, as you know, it's inevitably a rainy night in Tasmania. You look up at the ceiling and you see the water kind of hitting the glass, but this being this warm, beautiful environment with a game of football, and I think that'd be awesome. Really looking forward to it coming together, but delays aren't great. Next up, and I'm not going to spend too much time discussing this one whatsoever, there has been a $17 million offer put to GWS player Finn Callaghan, which he has refused, and signed on with the Giants for much less over only 4 years. It's a giant FU to St Kilda. They're a bit of a laughingstock at the moment, but they're also the subject for Nuff of the Week, which we're going to be airing very soon, and I'm going to talk about that in a whole lot more detail. Some final topics for discussion here. That Taron Thomas is beginning a 2-week trial at Swan Districts. We keep coming back to this bloke. It's one of those train wreck kind of stories, really. You almost can't take your eyes off it. But that's the latest update. We'll move on from that. Keilor Football Club has been stripped of a premiership for salary cap breaching. You don't often hear about that, especially in local leagues. That's a fascinating one. Sucked in Keilor. And Noah Bolter is due to face his sentence for his indiscretion around I think it was Christmas, New Year, both. His little indiscretion, that sentence is going to be handed down on the 27th of March. Not ideal timing for him, especially if there's then some sort of knock-on for his football. We'll see how all that plays out. Now, like I mentioned before, Nuff of the Week returns with this episode, and today we are going to be talking a little bit about St Kilda and the basket case that they've become. This is a pre-recorded video, so bear with me as I fire it up. Buckle in. Hopefully you enjoy, and I'll talk to you in about 10 minutes from now. Paul here from the Hoops Crew, and for the first time in 2025, it is time to record an episode of Nuff of the Week. the show where we talk about some of the dumb sides of the AFL industry. There's plenty of awesome things. There's plenty of highlights, plenty of things to celebrate. But of course, there's a bit of stupidity that goes on as well. And I want to take some opportunities to highlight that just a little bit. Now, for our first Nuff of 2025, it's going to go to the St Kilda Football Club and the way it has approached this bloke, Finn Callaghan. You've probably heard a little bit about this story already. Finn has been the recipient of a fairly huge offer, which he has declined and signed on further with the GWS Giants. And we're going to talk about it and then specifically some of St Kilda's highly illogical thinking, especially when it comes to list management and external recruiting in this episode of Nuff of the Week. Buckle in, let's get into it. But first, a word from our sponsor.
The Hoops Crew Media Network is proudly sponsored by Cyril Cook Florist, established in Geelong since 1915. Visit their website at www.cyrilcookflorist.com.au. That's Cook with an E. Give them a call on 035 222 2244 or mention the Hoops Crew to get yourself 20% off your next in-store purchase when you visit them at Shop 12, 11 Leather Street in Breakwater.
Thank you, Cyril Cook Florist, as always, for everything you do in your support of the Hoops Crew and what we do. Now, let's talk a little bit about Finn Callaghan, who he is. Let's set the stage a little bit because he may not really be a household name just yet, and yet he warranted a $17 million offer from the Saints to lure him across. Let's set the stage for who he is a little bit first, though. As we can see from our numbers, and these are our 2024 numbers here, he's averaging 22.9 disposals a game. It's above average, but it's not elite. Kicks, you can see, like he's more of a handball player. His ratio tips on the side of the handball. He doesn't necessarily mark the ball a huge amount. His tackles are pretty average. His clearances are pretty average. You would look at this, and you would look at what we're seeing across 2024, 2023, 2022, and keep in mind he's only played 3 seasons in the AFL up to this point. You would look at that and go, this is a really solid player who I think could be an excellent player in the future, but he hasn't necessarily proven that just yet. Some great numbers, a great start. He hits the scoreboard. How often does he hit the scoreboard? Not very often at all. He's kicked 7 goals in his career up to this point. There's a lot of promise here. There's a lot we can do and develop this bloke into, but he doesn't deserve $17 million. And yet, that is exactly what the St Kilda Football Club did with a very, very interesting decision here where they offered him $17 million. Let's bring up that report. It was an exclusive from 9 Sports. Tom Morris put it together. GWS Giants star Finn Callaghan knocks back the biggest offer in AFL history. Now, a bit more has played out as of the time that we record this, where it's not just a case of Finn receiving a monster offer of $17 million and declining it, but also he's now gone on to sign on the Giants with a much shorter contract for much less money. That is something we can peek into a little bit as well, but we'll focus on kind of some of the facts first. So GWS star Finn Callaghan has shunned the biggest offer in AFL history and is set to remain a Giant until free agency. It's understood St Kilda verbally presented a proposal of at least 10 years and more than $17 million in a bold bid to lure the 50-gamer back to Bayside Melbourne. He's played 50 games up to this point. How many players? I mean, we're a Geelong show here, so let's hone in on Geelong a little bit. How many of you watching out there now, had Joel Selwood been breaking through at the same equivalent point in his career, how many of you would have offered Joel Selwood $17 million over 10 years? You wouldn't. For as good as he is, you just don't make deals like that. Nick Dacos is probably a modern-day equivalent when we're talking about him. Harley Reid, those sorts of guys. You don't offer those sorts of sums of money. It's just, especially over that amount of time, it's an illogical sum, an irrational sum, and completely unnecessary as a part of list management process. And it's so interesting that deals like this are being thrown around when, Stephen Silvani is one of the heads of this at St Kilda. He knows this program very well. He obviously knows GWS quite well, but he would have had no crossover with Finn Callaghan in his time. It's a crazy offer that's going on here. We continue on. The 21-year-old, barring a late unexpected backflip, will soon put pen to paper on a fresh 4-year agreement that will lock him at the Giants until the end of 2029. He took 6 less years to stay at the Giants. And I think what we really want to hone in on here is basically a point of desperation that St Kilda is at, because this is not the only deal of this type that they've made in the recent history. We're going to bring up a couple of other reports here as well, where we can talk about Tom De Koning, we can talk about Zach Merritt. There's a whole range of offers just like this that they have put together in recent months. We're going to bring another one up here that relates to Tom De Koning, where Nick Riewoldt, interestingly, I mean, the headline is, Nick Riewoldt backs the $12 million play. I don't think that really matters, I guess, what Nick Riewoldt thinks. It doesn't really matter what I think in this particular case. But they offered $12 million to Tom De Koning as well. And that is still kind of an ongoing saga at the moment that Tom hasn't really sorted out one way or the other. Of course, there's this St Kilda offer. Of course, there's a conversation about him going to Geelong, I should say, to join his brother Sam. But we can see $1.7 million a year again, so the same per season average that we're seeing for Finn Callaghan being offered, and presumably over a shorter period of time for it to be $12 million. It might be over 6 or 7 if I recall. I can't remember the exact details here. But he's a ruckman who pays $17 million, $12 million for a ruckman in this current climate. We are getting there. We're getting closer and closer to the $2 million a season player, but we're not there yet. And certainly Finn Callaghan with 50 games under his belt, Tom De Koning, who shows a lot of potential, and I would very much like to see it. The Cats shows a lot of potential, but also doesn't warrant $1.7 million a season. Like these are crazy offers. And then finally, and probably the one that at least makes some modicum of sense, they offered a fit, and this was a very public thing as well, where they chased, I'm trying to find it amongst all my reports here, they chased Zach Merritt as well. And, Zach Merritt acknowledged it. And this is an older one. This report goes back to trade period last year. But there was a massive play made for him. And Zach Merritt, I can at least see it. Now, of course, we're not talking about a 10-year deal in the case of Zach Merritt because he's 28 years old already. As of the time of reporting, he might even be 29 now, depending on when his birthday is. But, he's about 28 years old. He's probably got 5 years of absolute peak football still in him, you would have thought. And then after that, we know what the game is like these days. More experienced players are starting to get chewed out a little bit more as the youth comes through and the speed remains on the game. He'll find a way to evolve because he's not necessarily the fastest player as it is, and his game smarts and his disposal quality is his greatest asset. But he would certainly command less money at this particular point. So, but there was a massive, massive offer put there. At the moment, he's not even on $1 million a season. I would say that right now he probably doesn't need to be. There's not many players that actually command that sort of money right now. And if you want to see what those figures look like, there was a video I put together a couple of weeks ago that was talking about the top 100 AFL players in the competition in terms of their salary. I don't know if he necessarily hits that. And of course, you offer more to player out of a club. But even Zach Merritt would be only there or thereabouts with $1 million, not 1.7. These are crazy, enormous deals that St Kilda are making, and it doesn't make a lick of sense. And what it screams of is desperation. And that's not a good look for any club. We know the history of St Kilda. We know how down on their luck they've been, how unlucky they've been in finals, how many near misses they've had. The bounce of a ball cost them a win in 2010. A toe poke maybe arguably cost them a grand final in 2009. A shaped goalpost in 2009 might have cost. They've been very, very unlucky, and they've had some amazing players over a long, long time. But the reality is this stinks of desperation. And when you're putting out that energy, that's not appealing. You just, if you're an AFL player, if you're Finn Callaghan as the most recent, at least publicly acknowledged recipient of one of these offers, you go, me, there's Tom De Koning, there's Zach Merritt, there's player XYZ that may have also received these offers as well. You go, they don't really know what they want. They just want some profile and they want to throw big bucks around. And again, it's just not a good look. You're not winning anyone over. You're not convincing external people, and you're probably also not convincing your own supporter base that you have any idea what you're doing, that you have a direction in mind. You're just trying to take the best available. And this isn't the draft. This is not the draft we go, we're going to pick the best player available. No, you're looking for players who complement what you've got. You're trying to develop a list They don't have an obvious superstar right now. And I do get that. But that's not Finn Callaghan. I mean, maybe he will be one day, but that's not Finn Callaghan right now. And it's an enormous punt to take on a player who may or may not be a rock star. Tom De Koning does not fit that profile whatsoever. Zach Merritt does, but you're offering less. You're not trying as hard, and he's got less time to spend at your club. The players, the pieces around him need to develop really fast so that he's going to be of any use and potentially be a guiding light towards a premiership. And we also know that Zach Merritt hasn't seen and won a final yet. There's so many question marks around the players that they're going for, and it doesn't make any sense. And it makes it so much easier if you're a potential candidate for the Saints in the future. If you're someone that they're reaching out to go, no, I'm not interested, sorry, but this stinks. You're desperate. You don't know what you want. You don't know what you're doing. Managers will smell this stuff out and will encourage their players not to go for it whatsoever. Unless for this player, it is all about the money, and there are certainly individuals like that out there. Unless they are all about the money and they are not chasing that personal or team success, then they're not going to be interested in St Kilda. And it looks ridiculous. It looks really bad. And I feel for the club. I feel for its supporter base. Because you're being made to look like fools. Sauce is better than this. The various other leaders within the club are absolutely better than this as well. Don't get desperate. Build your list up. Be really strategic in the draft. Pick some great players. When you've got this young grassroots, this underbelly that's coming up that looks really, really promising, players are going to take interest and they're going to want to come to your club based on those merits. And that's what you want. You want to be an appealing option, not a desperate option. Anyway, that's my ranting done with for this particular episode of Nuff the Week. It's the first of 2025, and I look forward to cracking into a whole bunch of other teams, individuals, supporter bases, whatever it happens to be over the course of this year. Thank you very much, as always, for checking this episode out. If you enjoy what you see now, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Give the video a thumbs up, like it, share it. Check out all the other awesome content on the YouTube channel as well. Post-game live is back. I'm doing match reactions. All right, enough of that. Get that clown off the TV set. So let's get to some Q&A. And we'll keep it fairly brief because I am just discovering that I'm having some family dramas in the house right now. So I'm going to keep this short and sharp for everyone tonight. So I do see the lentil on my face joke in the comment. That is absolutely rolled gold. So thoughts on Nuff of the Week? Thoughts on anything else? Throw them at me in the comment section here. We'll keep it fairly brief. I've got maybe 5 to 10 minutes up my sleeve, and then things start to get a little bit messy from there. I have seen the comments about Brandon Starcevich. I have seen the video at this particular point. Starcevich is surely going to be out. That's a big blow for them. An unfortunate one, an accidental one, nothing to see, I think, in particular, but it is a big blow for the Lions going into round 0. The concussion protocols won't allow him to come back in time, and I'm sure they won't play dodgy with it, but we'll be watching closely. I do see some comments here from either moment, drawing comparisons like look at Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis, and thank you for kind of making a basketball comparison because certainly that is absolutely my alley. I would say that none of the players that we discussed in that video, though, whether it's Tom De Koning, whether it's Finn Callaghan, whether it's Zach Merritt, none of those players are AFL equivalents of a Luka Doncic or Anthony Davis, I would say. We're talking about in that competition, these two guys being 2 of the top 10, Luka a possibility to be one of the absolute all-time legends of the sport. And I guess, but like they've already proven themselves, despite the fact that in the case of Luka, he's got a long way to go. None of those, Zach Merritt has, but then I would say he's not of that sort of level. But anyway, and I do, agree. I'm, trying to keep on top of the comments as they come in. It is a 5-man versus an 18-man, like proportion. I totally get the proportionate nature of the whole thing as well. Let's lean back on that one. Fire, Nico. Yeah, it is proportional. I do get that. I just don't know that these guys of that sort of level, like moving players like that, are like they're game changing for their for their team makeup. So, oh my God, there's vomit all through my house. This is gonna have to end any moment. Toss a couple more questions at me. What's the max you would offer for Harley Reid, a 10-year contract, and what would you give up for him? So dollars and cents, I don't know. We know what Geelong is like when it comes to dollars and cents. 6 years, which is kind of breaking my own rules. I really don't like to go above 5, but 6 years would be the number for me. So that would be what I'd offer Harley Reid, and take it or leave it, because he's a Geelong fan. That might also help sway him just a little bit. Any other questions from people? Otherwise, I am unfortunately going to need to wrap things up a little bit earlier than usual tonight. Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. We'll wrap things up from there. Thank you, and apologies, everyone, for kind of not extending the Q&A as much as I would have liked tonight. I wasn't expecting my daughter to be up by now, and I certainly wasn't expecting her to have thrown up through the house. So thank you for everyone for tuning in. A couple little housekeeping things as we wrap it all up. Thank you, everyone, for having tuned in tonight. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. There's a 7-day trial on the Patreon. Subscribe to that. Get early access to a whole range of content, extended content, exclusive content on the Patreon. And yeah, there's a 7-day period where you can sign up for, try before you buy, see if it's for you, and then consider tossing the $5 or $6 for the month at us. And stick around. Hopefully you enjoy. Beyond that, the content lineup for the week. Sunday, I'm back again with the Paul James Show. It is our season 2025 preview. We're going to go in depth with the whole season ahead. Monday night, Ben is back with the tipping point. Now, of course, you've seen his first video there, and a few people have highlighted the wild predictions that he has made. Stay tuned for probably more insanity from that. The footy tipping link is also in the show notes. We've had a lot of people asking about joining a footy tipping competition. Check out the show notes and you'll see the link to the footy tipping competition there. Tuesday night, the Chaps Chat Cats at 8:30. Wednesday night, because we play on Thursday night. Wednesday night, the Paul James Show returns for the specific preview for Geelong and Brisbane. It is a later show that night. I am playing a basketball game at 8:30. And it'll take me an hour plus another 20 minutes to get back. So I'll be coming in sweaty and gross, and I look forward to putting on an absolute mess of a show for you that night. Whilst on Thursday, after the game, post-game live returns for our Round Zero match. It is the big one. The season has begun properly. Buckle in, get ready for all that comes from that game. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I am rushing as I wrap this one up. Thank you, everyone, for having tuned in tonight, for popping your comments in the comments section, for asking your questions. Sorry, I haven't probably been able to respond to all of them, but I'm looking forward to talking a lot more. There is also a stream I'm planning, and I have to get it done really, really soon, where I'm going to be putting together my super coach team, and I want to get as many people in the chat sharing their thoughts, ideas. We'll kind of build a bit of a community team here together to take on the world of Supercoach in season 2025. That's where we'll wrap things up. Thank you to everyone in the comments tonight. As always, thank you to Cyril Cook Flores for supporting the show. And until next time, remain Geelong strong. I'll see you later.